I need to write this down. Not because I think it'll help me sleep tonight. Sleep hasn't come easy for months, but because if I don't, I'll start questioning whether any of this happened at all. Memory is a slippery thing when fear eats at you every night. The mind starts filing down the edges of things, sanding them until you can almost convince yourself it wasn't real. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw beneath that bridge. And I know I'll never forget it, no matter how much I wish I could. I grew up in a small town in northern Pennsylvania, the kind of place people usually pass through on their way to somewhere else. We had one high school, one grocery store, a few gas stations, and a downtown strip that always seemed to be closing more stores than it opened. It wasn't a bad place to grow up, but it was the kind of town that felt stale, like someone hit pause in the mid-1980s and never pressed play again. On the outskirts of town, there's an old railway bridge spanning Black Hollow Creek. Officially, it hasn't been used in decades. The railway shut down in the 70s, and the tracks leading up to it were ripped out years ago, leaving only the rusting skeleton of the bridge. It sits low, just about 12 feet above the water, sagging in the middle like it's tired of holding itself up. Everyone in town knows about it, but no one talks about it much. The place doesn't have a name on any map, but among kids, it was always called the Old Bridge. And it was the one place your parents warned you not to go. They never gave a reason, not a real one, anyway. If you pressed them, they'd mumble something about it being unsafe, about rotten wood and unstable metal. And sure, the bridge was in bad shape. But you could tell, even as a kid, that wasn't the real reason. There was a heaviness when adults mentioned it, like they wanted to change the subject as quickly as possible. We heard stories, of course. Kids always do. Some said a man hanged himself from the center beam back in the 40s. Others whispered about a girl who slipped and drowned in the creek, and that her body was never found. A few swore they'd heard voices when they stood beneath it, voices calling their names in the rush of the water. When you're 12 years old, that kind of thing doesn't scare you, it dares you. The first time I went to the bridge, it was late September of 2007. I was 17. It had rained for 2 days straight, and Black Hollow Creek was swollen and violent, churning with brown water that slapped against the banks. It was my friend Danny's idea. Danny was the kind of guy who thrived on pushing limits, always chasing the next thrill. He'd stolen a six-pack from his dad's garage fridge and convinced me and our friend Leah to come with him down to the bridge. We'll drink under there, stay out of the rain. Nobody'll find us, he said with that mischievous grin he always wore. Leah hesitated. She was braver than me in most ways, but I could tell she didn't like the idea. That place is gross, Danny, and it stinks like dead fish. Danny shrugged. So, it's just a bridge. What, you scared? That did it, of course. None of us wanted to be the one who said no. So we went. The walk out there wasn't long, maybe 20 minutes from my house, but it felt longer in the drizzle. By the time we reached the bridge, the rain had thinned to a mist, and the daylight was fading into that dull, gray twilight that makes everything look washed out. From the road above, the bridge didn't look like much. A rust-colored skeleton over a dark ribbon of water. Up close, though, it had presence. The metal beams groaned in the wind, and the air beneath it was several degrees colder, thick with the smell of damp earth and stagnant creek water. We ducked under and sat on a flat rock by the bank, passing cans of beer between us. Danny cracked jokes. Leah rolled her eyes, and I tried to ignore the way the sound of the rushing creek seemed to fill every gap in our conversation. At first, it was just background noise, water slapping rocks, sucking at the banks, swirling in eddies. But after a while, I started to notice patterns. Not words, not exactly, just rhythms, cadences. The way the water hissed and gurgled reminded me of someone whispering too low for me to catch. I remember shivering and pulling my jacket tighter, though it wasn't that cold. "You guys hear that?" I asked. Danny laughed. "Hear what? The river? Congrats, man, you got ears." "No," I insisted. "It sounds like voices." Leah stopped mid-sip and glanced at me. Her face was pale in the dim light. "You hear it too?" That was the first time my stomach dropped. We sat in silence for a while, straining our ears. The water rushed, foamed, hissed, and underneath it, faint but insistent, came the sound of whispers. At first, they were indistinct, like someone talking behind a wall. But slowly, they sharpened, weaving in and out of the noise of the creek. I swear to God, I heard my name. "Mark," just once, almost lost in the rush, but it was there. Leah gasped. "Oh my God, did you—" "Shut up," Danny snapped, his voice higher than usual. He was pale, too, though he tried to cover it. "It's just the wind in the beams. Metal makes noise, you know." But even he couldn't laugh it off completely. The whispers grew bolder. Sometimes they sounded like a single voice, other times like a dozen overlapping. They rose and fell with the current, not random, but deliberate, like a conversation carried on just out of reach. And always, beneath it all, was that sickening feeling of being noticed. Like whatever was whispering down, there wasn't just making sound. It was calling out to us. The longer we sat, the worse it got. The air seemed heavier, pressing on my chest. The shadows under the bridge deepened, though the sun hadn't fully set. At one point, Leah stood up, peering at the water. "There's something down there," she whispered. I followed her gaze. The creek surged past, murky and violent. But in the middle of it, just beneath the surface, something darker shifted. Not debris, not foam. It moved with intent. It looked, and I know how this sounds, like a figure. Long arms, too thin, trailing in the current. A head tilted just above the waterline, though I couldn't make out any features. It was there one moment, gone the next, swallowed by the rushing water. Leah screamed. Danny swore, tossing his beer can into the creek. "That's it. I'm done," Leah said, her voice shaking. "I'm not staying here." We left fast, stumbling up the bank and back toward the road. The whispers followed us, fading only when the bridge was a dark silhouette behind us. None of us said much on the walk home. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape beneath the water, drifting just below the surface like a drowned body. I kept hearing my name in the rush of the creek, whispered just at the edge of hearing. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, fueled by beer and scary stories. But deep down I knew better, because when I finally drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep, I dreamed of the bridge. Only in the dream, I wasn't standing beneath it. I was in the water. The current dragged me under, and through the blur of bubbles and mud, I saw faces staring back at me. Dozens of them. White, eyeless, open-mouthed, their lips moving soundlessly. And one of them, pale, hair floating like weeds, looked exactly like me. I tried to avoid the bridge after that first night. Every time I drove past it on the main road, its rusted frame lurking against the gray sky, I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. The rational part of me said it was just a relic, a hollow skeleton of metal and wood, decaying and useless. But the other part, the part that remembered the whispers, knew it was something else. By the following week, I began noticing subtle changes in my life. Small, almost imperceptible things at first. A cold spot in my bedroom that couldn't be explained, shadows that seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision, and, most disturbingly, whispers that followed me even when I wasn't near the bridge. I was lying in bed one night, scrolling on my phone when I heard it. "Mark!" I froze. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. The whisper was faint, almost imperceptible, but distinct. I checked the room, my parents' house, quiet, empty, nothing to explain the sound. I told myself it was imagination, the brain playing tricks after the encounter with the bridge. I tried to sleep, but the whispers grew louder as the night stretched on. They didn't come from a single direction. Sometimes from the window, sometimes from under the bed, sometimes directly inside my mind. I stopped sleeping in my room. It wasn't just auditory. Something was pulling me back to the bridge. I didn't understand why. My logic screamed at me, "Don't go there. Stay away." But every time I tried to concentrate, every time I tried to do something normal, the pull returned like an invisible leash tied to my chest. I kept imagining the water beneath it, the shadowy figure beneath the surface, and the way the whispers had called my name. It wasn't a thought. It was a need, gnawing at me, demanding attention. One evening, I found myself driving toward the bridge. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't told anyone. My hands gripped the steering wheel as if I could wrestle the decision from my body, but it was no use. The bridge loomed ahead, dark and imposing, more real than anything else in my life. I parked on the dirt road leading down to the creek and walked under the bridge alone. The sun had already set. Twilight melted into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of my phone flashlight. The wood beneath me creaked with every step. The smell of damp earth, rotting vegetation, and metal filled my nostrils. I sat on the same rock I remembered from that first visit. The air was thick, almost suffocating. The whispers began immediately, soft and layered, indistinct at first. Then I heard more breathing. Deep, wet, rasping breaths that didn't match my own. They came from the water, the shadows, the air itself. And somewhere, deep in the back of my mind, I heard a faint chorus of voices, chanting something I couldn't understand but felt compelled to obey. I leaned closer to the water. I didn't want to, but my body obeyed the compulsion. The surface rippled. Shapes shifted beneath. Not just one figure this time, dozens. Faces, long hair floating like weeds, eyes hollow, mouths opening and closing silently. And then a hand reached out from the water. Not a normal hand. Thin, almost skeletal, with long black nails. It didn't grasp at the water. It didn't grasp at me. It reached toward me, as if it wanted to pull me into the creek. I stumbled back, falling onto the muddy bank. My flashlight slipped, illuminating the faces for just a second. And then it was gone. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car, and I didn't look back. My heart pounded, my lungs burned, and my hands shook uncontrollably. I sat there, trying to calm down, trying to tell myself it was a hallucination. But it wasn't. For the next few nights, I slept on the couch in the living room. The whispers follow me there. Sometimes soft, almost tender, like someone was trying to coax me into something. Other times harsh, insistent, demanding my attention. I started seeing them in my dreams, the water, the faces, the skeletal hands. Every night, the visions became more vivid, more pressing, until I could barely distinguish between dream and reality. I started keeping a journal. At first, it was just to document what was happening, a method of convincing myself it wasn't madness. But soon it became something more. A record of the whispers, the shadows, the shapes in the water. A record of my own gradual unraveling. In it, I wrote down the words I heard, fragments of sentences, phrases, names. Some of them were my own. Others I had never heard before, yet I knew they were real. Come, stay, Mark, listen. I wasn't just being haunted. I was being studied, followed, drawn towards something. I knew I couldn't stay away forever. The pull was too strong, the whispers too insistent. A week after the first solo visit, I found myself returning at night, alone, without even realizing I had made the decision. This time I noticed more. The bridge wasn't just a structure, it was a living presence. The metal groaned and shifted, almost breathing. The shadows moved with intent, creeping along the beams as if inspecting me. And beneath the water, the figures were clearer, more human-like, though twisted and wrong. One stepped out of the water entirely. It was wet, dripping, elongated. Its head tilted unnaturally, the hollow eyes fixed on me. And then it spoke, not in whispers this time, but a clear, cold voice inside my mind. You came back. I froze. My legs refused to move. My hands gripped the rock until my knuckles bled. You can't leave now. The voice wasn't just a threat. It was a fact. Something had claimed me. And for the first time, I understood that whatever haunted the bridge wasn't waiting for me. It had always been with me. After that night, I started noticing the pull outside of the bridge. I would walk down the street and feel it tugging at my chest. I would drive past the creek and my body would turn without my consent, heading toward it. I tried to fight it. I tried to distract myself with school, work, friends, television, anything. But nothing worked. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore. They were around me, in every shadow, in the wind, in the creaking of doors. They followed me into bathrooms, into empty hallways, into the woods behind my house. And at night, when the house was quiet, the whispers became screams. By the end of the second week, I knew I had a choice. Either I went back, willingly, to the bridge, to whatever waited beneath, or I stayed away and let it consume me in smaller, slower ways, through fear, sleep deprivation, hallucinations, and madness. It was the first time I realized that fear wasn't my enemy. Fear was a warning. And the bridge. The bridge was alive in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. It wasn't just an old, abandoned structure. It was a gate, and something was waiting for me on the other side. I stopped trying to explain the whispers to anyone. Friends, family, teachers, all of them would have laughed, dismissed it as stress, insomnia, or the usual teenage drama. Even Leah and Danny, who had been there the first night, had their own stories now and no patience for mine. And besides, I wasn't sure I could explain it myself, because it wasn't just the voices anymore. It wasn't just the pull of the bridge. It was everywhere, creeping into the corners of my life like a stain I couldn't scrub clean. It began subtly. I would enter a room and feel an inexplicable cold, like the presence of water running through the floorboards. The shadows in my room seemed darker, thicker, moving independently. I would glance at them and swear I saw a figure lurking just at the edge of the light, only to blink and find nothing there. At first, I blamed stress, lack of sleep, and overactive imagination. But soon, the manifestations became harder to ignore. One night, I woke to a sound, the creak of floorboards, faint but deliberate. Someone, or something, was moving through my house. I got out of bed, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. Every room was empty, yet the air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. Then I heard it again, the faint whisper behind me, "Mark." I spun around. Nothing. I checked every corner, every closet, every inch of the house. The whispers followed me, layering over themselves, growing bolder, more insistent. By the time I returned to my room, the whispers had multiplied. They weren't saying just my name anymore. They were murmuring commands, threats, observations. "Look, don't sleep. Go. Come back." I started sleeping on the floor of the living room. Every time I tried my bed, it felt like I was sinking into water, drowning, watched by countless eyes. Nightmares became the norm. In them, I was always at the bridge. Sometimes I was under it, sometimes above it, sometimes in the water, dragged under by skeletal hands. Each dream was more detailed than the last. I could hear the whispers clearly now, distinct words forming. "You belong here. Stay with us. Don't leave." The water, once a murky mass, became clearer, revealing bodies beneath the surface. Not just one or two, but dozens. Faces frozen in terror, mouths open, eyes blank and unseeing. And among them, figures that resembled me, distorted, twisted, staring back. One night, I awoke screaming, drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled around me. I could still feel the pull of the water on my arms, the drag on my chest. The whispers had followed me into waking life. During the day, subtle things started happening. Items in my room were moved slightly. A notebook shifted, a chair turned, my journal opened to a blank page with scribbles I didn't write. I wasn't hallucinating entirely. I could see the changes clearly, and yet when I tried to catch whatever was doing it, I never saw anyone. The bridge had grown into a presence. It wasn't just a location anymore. It was inside me, entwined with my thoughts. When I drove past it, my body trembled involuntarily, hands gripping the steering wheel as if it had a mind of its own. The compulsion to go back became unbearable. I knew it was dangerous. I knew I shouldn't. But every day, I felt the tug, stronger, insistent, dragging in my chest like a chain. One night, I gave in. Alone, under the cold gaze of the moon, I walked toward the bridge. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, and the mist hanging above the creek clung to my clothes and skin. The air under the bridge was different now, thick, alive. The metal groaned like a living thing. The shadows seemed to shift in response to me, curling and stretching toward my body. And beneath the water, I saw movement, always movement. This time, the figures rose almost fully out of the water. Skeletal limbs dragging behind them, hair floating like black weeds, hollow eyes fixed on me. "You've returned," one voice said. Clear, deliberate, cold. I wanted to run. My body screamed at me to flee. But my legs wouldn't obey. The whispers had learned to control me. I could hear them in my bones now, inside my muscles, commanding, compelling. It happened suddenly. One of the figures rose fully, stepping onto the muddy bank. It was wet, elongated, and grotesque. Its movements were slow, deliberate, unnatural. Its eyes, empty and black, fixed on me. "Mark," it said. The voice wasn't spoken. It was inside my mind. I felt a hand, cold, skeletal, slimy, brush against my shoulder. My body froze. Fear paralyzed me. "You will join us," it whispered. The sensation was unbearable, like ice wrapping around my spine and squeezing my lungs. I fell backward, splashing into the shallow edge of the creek. The figure followed, moving with unnatural grace, floating rather than walking. I scrambled out, my flashlight shaking in my hands. The whispers were all around me now, chanting, calling, laughing. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. I ran all the way home, falling into my bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. The presence lingered in the room, a weight pressing on my chest. In the days that followed, the line between reality and nightmare began to dissolve. I would see figures at the edge of my vision, only to blink and find nothing. The whispers invaded my thoughts constantly, commanding me, cajoling me, mocking me. People around me began noticing changes. Leah mentioned I was quieter, withdrawn. Danny said I looked pale and distracted. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I was unraveling. The bridge wasn't a place anymore. It was a force. It was aware. And I knew, deep down, that one day it would claim me completely if I didn't find a way to fight it. But I didn't know how. By the end of the third week, I realized the bridge was no longer just under my feet. It was inside me. Every thought, every impulse, every heartbeat carried its presence. I could feel the water flowing in my veins, the skeletal hands tracing my spine, the hollow eyes watching me from the darkness of every room. The whispers became coherent, forming sentences, forming threats, forming promises. "You can't escape. You are ours. Soon, you will return permanently." And the most terrifying thought of all, a realization I dared not voice to anyone, was that the bridge didn't just want me to visit. It wanted me to join it, to become part of the creatures beneath it, to be claimed by the water and shadows for eternity. I was already halfway there. By the time part 4 begins, I was barely holding on. Life had become a series of half-waking nightmares and compulsions I couldn't resist. Friends no longer called. Family no longer spoke. My parents had started avoiding eye contact, worried about something I couldn't explain. The whispers had grown stronger, and the presence under the bridge had seeped into every part of my existence. I woke one morning to find muddy footprints in my bedroom. Not mine, they were wet, long, and thin, trailing from the window to my bed. Panic surged through me, but curiosity overcame fear. I followed the prints, which ended at my desk, where my journal lay open on a blank page that had been filled with scrawls in a handwriting I didn't recognize. "Return. Tonight. Don't resist." The handwriting was jagged, cold, impossible to ignore. My stomach knotted. I knew it wasn't a prank. No one could have done this, at least not anyone human. The whispers had become my constant companion. I couldn't think, sleep, or eat without hearing them. Their voices were everywhere, inside the walls, inside my skull, even in my blood, pulsing with every heartbeat. I started seeing them during the day now. Shadows stretched unnaturally long in the corners of my vision. Figures moved just out of focus, always at the edge, never fully visible. At first, I tried to dismiss them as hallucinations, but there were too many witnesses, footprints in mud, displaced objects, puddles of water in the hall where no rain could have reached. One afternoon, I saw a figure at the edge of the creek, standing perfectly still beneath the bridge. It wasn't human. It was tall, elongated, limbs that bent in impossible angles, a head that tilted unnaturally, eyes hollow and black. Its presence was magnetic, drawing me in without my consent. The pull became unbearable. My body responded before my mind could even think. I walked toward the bridge, drawn as though by a magnet, ignoring the terror clawing at my chest. I arrived beneath the bridge just after dusk. The mist had thickened, rising from the water like smoke from some ancient fire. The air was heavy and wet. Every beam, every plank seemed alive, groaning in anticipation. The water churned unnaturally. Faces swirled beneath the surface, countless mouths opening silently, calling my name. And then they rose. Figures, dozens of them, slick and elongated, their movements fluid and unnatural. They stepped onto the bank, surrounding me, their hollow eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You came back," one said. The voice was inside my head, unmistakable. "And now, you cannot leave." The whispers layered over themselves, chanting in a rhythm that made my knees buckle. My body wanted to fight, but my muscles refused. I was frozen, trapped in a web of unseen power. One of them approached. Its skeletal hand reached out, brushing against my cheek. The coldness was intolerable, searing my skin with frost that went deeper than touch. "You belong with us," it said. I tried to speak. My voice failed. I tried to move. My legs were lead. The figure moved closer, and I could feel the water from the creek curling around my feet, pulling at me, tugging, coaxing, dragging. For the first time, I realized the bridge wasn't just a location. It was a being, a predator, patient and intelligent, feeding off fear, shaping reality to claim its prey. I screamed, "Finally," and something reacted. A wooden beam cracked above me. Something fell. I didn't see what, but it struck the creature, sending it backward. The shadows recoiled. The chanting faltered. I bolted, but I didn't escape unscathed. My shoulder caught on a plank, tearing the skin and leaving a burn-like sensation that lingered. The pain was real, physical, but so was the presence behind it, as if the bridge itself had marked me. I ran home, soaked, trembling, covered in mud and blood. And the whispers followed, louder now, harsher, almost mocking. After that night, the world itself felt altered. The bridge's influence seeped into my perception. I would drive past it and see figures standing in the middle of the road, waiting for me. At school, shadows moved just beyond my vision. Even my dreams were no longer safe. The water came into my room. The figures reached out from the darkness, calling my name, laughing in voices that weren't voices. I stopped going outside when I could avoid it. I barricaded myself in my room. My journal became the only thing that grounded me, a record of the horrors and the commands. But even that wasn't enough. The whispers had learned persistence. If I didn't move, they moved me. If I didn't listen, they forced me to obey. The bridge didn't just want me to visit anymore. It wanted to consume me entirely, mind and body. Leah finally came to check on me. She stood in my room, pale, staring at the open journal and the trembling lines I had written. "Mark, what's happening to you?" she whispered. I tried to explain, but words failed. She didn't see the shadows moving behind me, didn't hear the whispers curling through the air like smoke. She couldn't feel the tug in my chest, the pull toward the bridge that had become a constant physical presence. She urged me to leave town, to get help. But even as she spoke, I could feel it, the bridge's reach, extending through the mist, through streets, through walls. I couldn't escape. That night, the whispering became screaming. The air in my room seemed to thicken, pressing down, filling my lungs with cold. And then I heard it, clear as day, behind my closed eyelids. Come home. We've been waiting. I tried to resist, clinging to the fragments of my former life, friends, school, family. But the bridge's power was growing. Each night, it invaded more. Each day, it tugged harder. I began to see glimpses of the water beneath it in my bedroom floorboards, the shadowy figures in every reflection. And I knew without doubt, that soon I would have no choice. The bridge would claim me fully, body and soul. It wasn't a question of if, only when. I have been trying to write this for weeks, though every time I begin, the whispers intensify, cutting through my thoughts, threatening to pull me back beneath the bridge before I can finish. But I need someone to know. Someone must understand what the bridge truly is, what it does, what it takes. By now, it wasn't just the whispers. The bridge had become alive, a sentient force that controlled not just my actions, but my very perception. The shadows were more than shadows, the water more than water. The air under the bridge had grown thick with consciousness, a terrible awareness that seemed to calculate my every heartbeat, every breath, every step. Days before what I now realize was the end, I lost all sense of time. I couldn't sleep, eat, or leave my room without feeling the bridge's tug. It was no longer a direction or a location. It had grown into a gravitational force, pulling me into its reality, into the water, into the shadows. I stopped answering calls. I stopped leaving the house. Leah and Danny had given up. The bridge didn't allow any interruptions. It needed me alone, consumed, ready to be claimed. Then one night, I think it was a night, though time had begun to bend strangely, I dreamed it again. The water was blacker than anything I'd seen before. Faces floated just beneath the surface, countless mouths opening and closing silently. And there at the center was me, or something like me, a twisted reflection, arms stretched impossibly long, eyes hollow. It stared at me and whispered, "It is time." I woke screaming. I knew what I had to do. Part of me wanted to resist, to flee forever, but my body no longer belonged to me. It obeyed the bridge's pull. I found myself outside, walking down the path toward it, as if my feet had their own memory, my mind a passenger. The air was thick with mist, the water below churning violently. The bridge loomed above me, groaning like an ancient beast awakening from slumber. Shadows moved across the beams, swirling as if alive, curling toward me, beckoning. The whispers were deafening now. They layered over one another, a chorus of thousands of voices calling my name, urging me forward, chanting in rhythms that made my teeth ache. Come, join us, belong, return. When I finally reached the center of the bridge, I saw the water clearly for the first time. It was no longer a creek. It was an abyss, deep and endless, reflecting not the night sky, but the darkness itself, alive with faces, limbs, and eyes. They rose from the water, dozens, hundreds, grotesque parodies of human form. Limbs elongated, heads tilting impossibly, mouths stretching into silent screams. And at the center, the figure that had first reached for me all those weeks ago, wet, skeletal, its black eyes fixed on mine. "You cannot leave," it whispered inside my mind. "You are ours." I tried to run, to scream, to resist, but was too late. The water licked at my feet, cold and liquid as ice, pulling me downward. My hands clawed at the planks, but the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly, each step dragging me further into the abyss. I fell, or perhaps I was pulled. I don't know which. The water engulfed me, cold beyond comprehension, and I felt hands, thousands of them, wrapping around my body, pulling, dragging, intertwining. The faces beneath me stared with hollow eyes, mouths opening to whisper, to scream, to call. I wanted to fight. I wanted to claw my way back to the surface. But the bridge had claimed me. Every heartbeat, every thought, every cell of my being was now part of its tide. The whispers became my voice. The shadows became my skin. The water became my lungs. I became part of it. Time doesn't exist here. I have no memory of hours, minutes, days. Only the constant pull, the voices, the faces, the water. I have seen the bridge in ways no human should see, a living organism of metal, shadow, and water, infinite in depth, consuming, shaping. I have seen others here, shapes like mine, once human, now twisted into the will of the bridge. They reach out, but not to grab me. They reach to pull others, to drag them into the abyss as they themselves were dragged. And in the faces, I see myself reflected again and again, a fractal of fear and obedience, repeating endlessly. Sometimes I think I hear my old name. Mark, my voice, or what remains of it, merges with the chorus. I am both me and not me. I feel the tug of the bridge even now as I write these words or think them, unable to fully control the hand that moves the pen. I do not know if anyone will read this. I do not know if anyone would believe it. But if you do, if you somehow hold this account, know this, the bridge is alive. It waits. It claims. Do not go there. Do not listen to the whispers. Because if you do, it will take you. And once it has you, you're never coming back.